I knew something was wrong the moment my truck reached the north bend of Whitaker Farm Road. For nearly my entire life, that road had been dirt, gravel, red clay, and tractor tracks. It curved along the edge of our hay field, passed under 2 old walnut trees, and opened into the northern pasture where my father taught me how to back a trailer before I was old enough to drive on a real highway. It was never pretty. It was never smooth. But it was ours. That morning, it was gone. In its place was fresh black asphalt, still dark enough to shine under the Tennessee sun. White lane stripes had been painted down the middle. New curbs lined both sides. A black iron gate stood across the road where my cattle trailer used to pass, and beside it was a small guard booth with tinted windows, a security camera, and a sign that made my hands tighten around the steering wheel. Oak Ridge Estates. Private residence entrance. I stopped the truck in the middle of the road and just stared. This was not the main entrance to Oak Ridge Estates. That was 2 miles south, with stone pillars, flower beds, and a big polished sign for the kind of people who paid extra to pretend they lived in the countryside without smelling hay or hearing tractors. This was my farm access road. My family had used it since before the county had paved half the roads around here. My grandfather hauled timber across it. My father moved cattle through it. I used it every week to reach the north field. And now an HOA guard was standing in front of a luxury gate, telling me I could not drive through. He treated me like I was lost. He said farm vehicles were not allowed through the new residence-only entrance. He pointed toward the south road and said deliveries and service traffic had to use another route. When I told him this road belonged to Whitaker Farm, he looked back at the sign, then back at my dusty pickup, and said the HOA had purchased access through the developer. That was the first time I heard the lie. A few minutes later, Marjorie Bell, the president of the Oak Ridge HOA, arrived in a white SUV and stepped onto the new asphalt like she was inspecting a resort driveway. She did not apologize for the gate. She did not ask why I was blocked from my own field. She explained that the old farm road had been underused, unattractive, and poorly maintained, and that the new entrance would raise property values for the entire community. She talked about improvement. She talked about progress. She talked about residents who had paid premium prices for a private back entrance. What she did not talk about was the deed. Because 3 weeks later, that same deed would shut down their brand new gate, force the guard booth off my road, drag the developer into a county investigation, and make Oak Ridge residents realize they had paid extra for an entrance their HOA never owned. So before you decide this was just a farmer being stubborn about an old dirt road, ask yourself this, and leave your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if someone paved over your family's land, put a guard at the gate, and then told you to go around? I did not argue with the guard. I did not block the road with my tractor. I turned my truck around, drove back to the farmhouse, opened the old safe in my father's office, and pulled out a yellow deed from 1926. That was the piece of paper Oak Ridge Estates forgot existed. And it was about to cost them their entrance. My name is Thomas Whitaker, and I was 53 years old when Oak Ridge Estates decided my family's road looked better on their brochure than it did on my deed. I was born on Whitaker Farm, in the same white farmhouse where my father was born, and where his father had lived before him. The house sat just outside Cedar Hollow, Tennessee, far enough from town that you could hear coyotes at night, but close enough that developers had been circling the land for years like buzzards waiting for an old farm family to finally give up. Whitaker Farm used to be more than 300 acres. By the time it came to me, it was smaller, about 80 acres of working land that my family had fought hard to keep. Over the years, pieces had been sold to pay taxes, medical bills, and debts that came with bad seasons. One of those sold pieces became Oak Ridge Estates, a gated neighborhood with stone pillars, tennis courts, a clubhouse, a man-made lake, and street names that sounded like they were chosen by a marketing company instead of people who had ever walked the land. I did not hate the neighborhood. I really did not. Some of the residents were decent people. They bought eggs from me in the spring. They brought their kids to the fence to watch the horses. Around Halloween, I sold pumpkins from a wagon near the barn, and half the families from Oak Ridge showed up in clean SUVs with children wearing boots that had never touched mud before. I did not mind that. I actually liked seeing kids remember that food and animals came from somewhere real. But there was always a line. On one side of that line was Oak Ridge Estates, with its HOA rules, trimmed hedges, and people who complained when a trash can stayed out too long. On the other side was Whitaker Farm, with diesel engines before sunrise, hay dust in the air, fence posts stacked behind the barn, and a private farm access road that had existed long before anyone thought of building luxury homes there. That road mattered more than people understood. To them, it probably looked like an old dirt lane. To me, it was history. My grandfather had hauled timber across it when the north field was still wooded. My father had driven cattle through it during storms when the lower pasture flooded. I learned to drive a tractor there, sitting on a cracked vinyl seat while my father walked beside me and told me to keep my hand steady. Every gatepost, every bend, every washout after heavy rain carried some piece of my family's life. It was not abandoned. It was not unused. It was not some forgotten strip of land waiting for an HOA to discover it. I used it every week. I used it to get hay equipment into the north field. I used it to haul fence wire, feed, gravel, and tools. When the creek crossing near the south pasture got too soft after rain, that road was the only reliable way to move heavy equipment without tearing up the rest of the farm. It was not scenic access. It was not a shortcut. It was part of how the farm survived. And the paperwork said so. My father had always been strict about land records. He kept deeds, maps, old tax receipts, easement papers, boundary notes, and handwritten letters in a fireproof safe in his office. When I was younger, I thought he was being obsessive. He used to tell me that land was only yours if you could prove it when someone richer wanted it. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. After Oak Ridge paved my road, I understood exactly what he meant. For years before this happened, the HOA had complained about small things. They did not like dust drifting near their back fence when I drove the tractor by. They did not like the sound of hay equipment early in the morning. They did not like seeing round bales stacked where their residents could view them from the upper walking trail. One letter even called my equipment area a visual nuisance, as if a working farm had accidentally wandered into their luxury neighborhood instead of the other way around. I answered politely whenever I had to. I reminded them that Whitaker Farm predated the subdivision by generations. I kept my fences repaired. I slowed down near the shared boundary. I even spread extra gravel on the farm road one summer after residents complained about dust, even though I did not owe them that. But polite people are often mistaken for weak people. Marjorie Bell, the HOA president, was especially good at making demands sound like community standards. She had that polished way of speaking that made every inconvenience seem like an emergency and every HOA preference sound like law. She once told me the neighborhood had invested too much into its appearance to have farm traffic affecting the resident experience. I remember almost laughing at that phrase. Resident experience. As if my family's land was part of their hotel package. Looking back, I think the road bothered them because it reminded them Oak Ridge Estates was not the first thing built there. Every time my tractor rolled past their manicured fence line, it proved that the farm was older than their gates, older than their clubhouse, and older than Marjorie's authority. So they did what people like that often do. They stopped asking how to live beside the land. They started looking for a way to control it. If you have ever owned property near a new development, you already know how this starts. First they complain about dust. Then they complain about noise. Then they call something ugly. Then they call it unsafe. And one day, without saying it directly, they begin treating your land like a problem they are entitled to solve. Share this story with anyone dealing with a developer or HOA near family land, because the first warning sign is not always a bulldozer. Sometimes it is a polite letter using the word improvement. I thought their letters were just irritation. I thought their complaints were just rich people wanting countryside views without countryside reality. I never imagined they would hire a contractor, pave over my farm road, put up a gate, and sell that access to residents as if Whitaker history was nothing but unused dirt. But that is exactly what they did. And they did it because they thought an old road had no power. They had no idea an old deed did. The paving started on a Tuesday morning, but the warning signs had been sitting there for almost a week. At first, they were just survey stakes. Bright pink flags along the north bend of Whitaker Farm Road, then orange paint on the gravel, then a few white markings sprayed near the drainage ditch. I noticed them while hauling feed to the upper pasture. They looked official enough that I assumed the county was checking runoff or maybe marking utility lines for work near Oak Ridge Estates. That was my mistake. I called the county road office anyway, just to be safe. The woman who answered said there was no county road project scheduled on my parcel. She suggested it might be private utility work and told me to call back if equipment showed up. I took photos of the markings, mostly out of habit, then went on with my chores. 3 mornings later, equipment showed up. By the time I reached the north bend, a grading crew had already scraped away the top layer of gravel and clay. They had pushed the old crown of the road flat, cut into the shoulder, and laid down crushed stone like they were preparing a subdivision street. A dump truck was backing in with another load. A roller sat beside the ditch. 2 men were setting forms for a new concrete curb along the edge where my father used to pull the hay wagon wide so the rear wheels would not sink after rain. I parked my truck sideways and stepped out before they could bring in the asphalt machine. The foreman met me halfway. He was polite, but he had that look contractors get when they have already been told somebody might complain. I asked who authorized work on Whitaker Farm Road. He checked his clipboard and said the project belonged to Oak Ridge Estates, Phase 2 access improvement. According to his work order, the HOA and developer had approved a secondary gated entrance for residents. I told him he was standing on my farm road. He looked back at the scraped dirt, then at the Oak Ridge fence line, then down at his paperwork. He said their site plan identified it as an access corridor. I asked to see the easement. He said he did not have that in the truck. I asked for a permit number. He pointed to the developer's name on the work order and said they handled all approvals before construction. That was when Marjorie Bell arrived. She came in a white SUV, the same one I had seen at HOA meetings and ribbon-cutting photos. She wore sunglasses, pressed slacks, and the expression of someone who believed arriving made her the authority. Behind her came a man from the developer, younger than her, carrying rolled plans under one arm. Marjorie did not ask why I was upset. She did not ask whether there had been a misunderstanding. She said, almost before the SUV door closed, that the road improvement was long overdue. I remember that phrase because it hit me harder than an insult. Long overdue. As if my family's road had been waiting all these years for her approval. She explained that Oak Ridge residents needed a safer northern entrance. The main gate was congested during school drop-off hours. Emergency access would be improved, she said. Property values would be protected. The old farm road, in her words, was an eyesore and a liability. Turning it into a proper paved entrance would benefit everyone. I told her it would not benefit me if I could not move my tractor through it. She gave me a thin smile and said farm equipment would need to use a more appropriate agricultural route. When I asked what route that was, the developer representative pointed to a county road nearly 7 miles around the back side of my land. He said it was wider, safer, and less disruptive to residents. Less disruptive to residents. That was the moment I understood what they were really doing. They were not just paving the road. They were trying to separate the farm from the land the farm still needed to work. I told them the road had been part of Whitaker Farm for generations. Marjorie said the HOA had been assured by the developer that the access corridor could be improved. I asked again for the legal document that gave them the right to do it. She said the attorneys had reviewed the matter. I asked which attorneys. She said I could submit questions in writing to the association. Then she turned away from me and told the foreman to continue. For a second, I wanted to step in front of the roller and dare them to move. I wanted to hook my chain to their forms and drag the whole setup into the ditch. I wanted to do the kind of thing that would make a great story at the feed store and a terrible exhibit in court. So I did not. I stood there and recorded. I filmed the grader pushing through the old roadbed. I filmed the curb forms being set. I filmed the developer representative telling me the HOA had rights to the corridor. I filmed Marjorie saying the community had invested too much in the new entrance to let outdated farm use interfere with progress. By late afternoon, the first layer of asphalt was down. By the next day, the gate posts were being installed. By Friday, there was a black iron gate, keypad, camera pole, and a small guard booth positioned right where my truck used to swing wide into the north field. Then came the sign. Oak Ridge Estates. Private residence entrance. No farm or service vehicles. I stood in front of that sign for a long time. It was not only that they had paved over my road. It was that they had renamed it. They had taken a working farm access road, wrapped it in black iron, and turned it into a selling point. And then they had the nerve to tell me I was the traffic they wanted to keep out. The damage showed up immediately. That weekend, I needed to haul wire and posts to repair a broken fence near the north pasture. The shortest route was the farm road. It had always taken 10 minutes. Instead, the guard at the new gate refused to open it. He said his instructions were clear. No farm vehicles. No trailers. No exceptions without HOA approval. I told him I was the owner of the road under his booth. He said I would have to take that up with management. So I drove the long way around. 7 miles of county road, 2 narrow turns, 1 low shoulder, and an extra 40 minutes just to reach my own fence line. By the time I got there, 2 calves had pushed through the broken section and wandered into the lower brush. It took half the afternoon to get them back. The following Monday, a hay delivery was delayed because my trailer could not use the north access. A week later, I missed a narrow weather window to move equipment before rain. The lower creek crossing turned soft, and one of my tractors sank deep enough that I had to call a neighbor with a larger machine to pull it free. Every inconvenience had a cost. Fuel. Time. Damaged ground. Delayed work. Extra labor. But to Marjorie, it was all just the price of making Oak Ridge look cleaner. Then the letter came. It was printed on HOA letterhead and addressed to me like I was one of their residents, even though I had never lived inside Oak Ridge Estates and never joined their association. The letter said farm traffic near the new entrance was creating a visual nuisance and potential safety concern for residents. It warned that continued interference with the entrance project could result in legal action. I read that sentence twice, then laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the arrogance of it was almost unreal. They had blocked my road. They had delayed my work. They had put a guard booth on my access. And now they were warning me not to interfere. That night, I placed the letter on my kitchen table beside the photos of the construction and the video clips from my phone. I could feel anger pushing at me, the kind of anger that begs you to do something loud. But I kept hearing my father's voice from years ago, back when I was too young to understand why he locked every land record in a safe. Land is only yours if you can prove it when someone richer wants it. So I did not call Marjorie. I did not threaten the guard. I did not touch the gate. I walked into my father's old office, opened the safe, and started looking for the paper trail that Oak Ridge Estates had been hoping was too old to matter. And at the bottom of a brown envelope labeled North Farm Road, I found the first page that would ruin their entire entrance. The paper was brittle enough that I was afraid to breathe on it wrong. I carried the brown envelope from my father's office to the kitchen table and set it under the yellow light above the stove. Outside, the farm was quiet. The kind of quiet I had always trusted. But a mile north, sitting on land my family had used for nearly a century, there was a brand new gate telling me I did not belong. The envelope had my father's handwriting on it. North Farm Road, do not throw away. Inside were old tax maps, survey notes, a folded plat with faded ink, and several copies of deeds that had passed through the Whitaker family over the years. But the document that made my hands go still was dated 1926. It was not just a deed for land. It described the Northern Farm Access Road by location, width, purpose, and use. The language was old-fashioned, but the meaning was clear enough that I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. Private agricultural access for Whitaker Farm and lawful successors. That phrase sat on the page like a fence post driven into stone. I did not rush back to the gate. I did not wave the deed in the guard's face. I did not call Marjorie at midnight and ask if her attorneys had reviewed the part written nearly 100 years before she ever moved into Oak Ridge. I made copies. I scanned everything. I took photos of the original documents and saved them in a folder with the construction videos, the HOA letter, and every picture I had taken of the paving work. Then I started building a timeline. I wrote down the day I first saw the survey stakes. The day the county road office told me no public project was scheduled. The day the grading crew arrived. The time Marjorie told me the road improvement was approved. The day the gate went up. The first time the guard refused to let my truck through. The extra miles I drove to reach the north pasture. The calves that got through the broken fence. The equipment delay. The tractor stuck near the creek crossing. Every piece of inconvenience became part of the record. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office with the original deed inside a plastic sleeve. The clerk was a woman named Denise who had worked there long enough to know half the landowners in Cedar Hollow by their grandparents' names. When I told her Oak Ridge had paved over North Farm Road, she looked at me over her glasses and said, "They paved which road?" That was the first moment I knew I was not crazy. Denise helped me search the public records. We pulled the 1926 deed. Then the transfer from my great-grandfather to my grandfather. Then the later deed from my grandfather to my father. Then the documents showing the portions that had been sold off decades ago. We followed the chain forward, one recorded page at a time, until we reached the sale that eventually became Oak Ridge Estates. The pattern was not complicated. My family had sold land next to the road. Not the road. There was no dedication to public use. No recorded easement granting Oak Ridge residents access. No document transferring ownership of North Farm Road to the developer. No maintenance agreement. No shared entrance covenant. Nothing that matched the polished marketing language Marjorie had been using. Denise printed certified copies for me. Then she circled the book and page numbers where the 1926 language appeared and told me something my father would have loved to hear. Old records are still records. From there, I called a licensed surveyor. He came out 2 days later, and I walked him along the full length of the road. The fresh asphalt made everything look official, and I hated that. Black pavement, painted stripes, new curbs, a camera pole, a guard booth with a little air conditioner humming in the window. To anyone passing by, it looked like Oak Ridge had every right to be there. But the surveyor did not look at polish. He looked at monuments, bearings, old plats, tax lines, and the legal description. He marked the road corridor with survey flags. By the time he finished, the flags told the story better than I ever could. The new gate post sat inside the old farm access corridor. The guard booth sat on the shoulder of that corridor. The camera pole had been installed where my father used to stack temporary fencing during calving season. Almost the entire so-called residence entrance lined up with land records tied to Whitaker Farm, not Oak Ridge Estates. While the surveyor worked, I took more video. This time, I was careful to include the flags, the road, the guard booth, and the Oak Ridge sign in the same frame. I wanted no one to be able to say later that I had exaggerated. I wanted the truth to be visible even to someone who had never seen a deed in their life. Then I called a real estate attorney in Knoxville. Her name was Claire Benton, and she had handled farm boundary disputes, easements, and development cases for more than 20 years. I sent her the deed, the certified county copies, my photos, the construction videos, the HOA letter, and the new survey. She told me she would review it and call me the next day. She called back in 2 hours. The first thing she asked was whether Oak Ridge had been advertising the northern entrance as an amenity. I told her I had seen banners near the subdivision that said new private rear entrance now open, and I had heard from a resident that some new lots had been sold with that access listed as a premium feature. Claire went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Thomas, they may not have just built on the wrong road. They may have sold access they didn't own." That sentence turned my frustration into something much bigger. Because this was no longer just about me being blocked from a pasture. If Oak Ridge had marketed that gate to residents, collected dues to maintain it, and sold homes based on access through my farm road, then the HOA and developer had created a problem with every homeowner who believed that entrance was legally theirs to use. Claire told me not to confront anyone directly anymore. She said every conversation should go through writing or happen with a witness. She told me to keep track of each time I was denied access, each extra mile driven, each farm cost tied to the closure, and every public claim Oak Ridge made about the entrance. So I documented everything. I filmed the guard refusing to open the gate for my hay trailer. I saved the dashcam footage of the 7-mile detour. I photographed the mud damage near the creek crossing caused by being forced onto the wrong route. I kept receipts for extra fuel and the neighbor's equipment time when he had to pull my tractor free. I saved the HOA letter accusing me of creating a nuisance near their new entrance. I took screenshots of Oak Ridge's website showing the rear gate listed as a community feature. And every night, I backed it all up. If you are listening to this while dealing with a property dispute, do not underestimate boring evidence. A receipt can speak louder than an argument. A map can do more damage than a threat. A certified deed can shut down a lie that has been repeated in expensive brochures. Save this story, because one day the detail you almost throw away might be the one that proves everything. By the end of that week, Claire had enough to prepare a formal demand letter. But before she sent it, she asked me one more question. Did anyone from the HOA ever put in writing that farm vehicles were not allowed through the new entrance? I sent her a copy of the sign. No farm or service vehicles. Then I sent the video of the guard saying the same thing while standing on the road my family had used since 1926. Claire called me back almost immediately. That, she said, is going to be a problem for them. Because they had not only taken my road. They had left proof at the gate that they intended to keep me from using it. Claire's demand letter went out the following Tuesday morning. It was sent to Oak Ridge Estates HOA, the developer, the property management company, the security contractor, and the attorney listed on the subdivision's public filings. It was not dramatic. It did not accuse anyone in emotional language. It simply laid out the chain of title, the 1926 deed, the certified county records, the survey, the construction photos, the entrance sign, the video of the guard refusing my access, and the HOA letter treating my farm traffic like a nuisance. Then it made one thing very clear. Oak Ridge had no recorded right to convert North Farm Road into a private residence entrance. Claire demanded that they stop using the gate immediately, remove the guard booth, restore my unrestricted agricultural access, preserve all project records, disclose any documents they claimed gave them rights to the road, and reimburse the costs already caused by blocking my farm equipment. She also warned them that continuing to deny my access could expose them to claims for trespass, interference with agricultural use, property damage, and misrepresentation if residents had been sold homes based on an entrance the HOA did not legally control. For 2 days, nobody answered. Then Marjorie sent a short email saying the HOA had relied on the developer's representations that the entrance corridor was part of the Oak Ridge access plan. She said the board believed the road was unused, poorly maintained, and suitable for improvement. She also said closing the entrance would create hardship for residents who had already incorporated it into their daily routines. Claire forwarded me that email with one sentence typed above it. They still haven't produced an easement. That was the whole case in plain language. They had confidence. They had asphalt. They had a gate, a booth, a sign, and residents who liked the shortcut. But they did not have the one thing that mattered. They did not have a recorded legal right. The developer's response came next, and it was even worse for them. Their attorney attached a marketing site plan showing a clean road connection from the northern edge of Oak Ridge to the county road beyond my pasture. On that drawing, the route was labeled Future Secondary Entrance. It looked official at first glance, but Claire noticed the small print at the bottom. It said the plan was conceptual and subject to final approval, easements, and county review. Subject to easements. Those 3 words told us the developer knew the route required additional legal rights before it could be used. And there was no evidence those rights had ever been obtained. Claire searched the county planning records next. That was where the second twist appeared. Oak Ridge Estates had one approved public entrance in its subdivision plan, the Southern Gate. There was an emergency access route shown near the northern side, but it was not approved as a daily residence entrance, and it did not authorize construction across Whitaker Farm's private access road. Any change to traffic flow, gate placement, drainage, and permanent access would have required county review. No review had been completed. No approval had been issued. No easement had been recorded. When Claire explained that to me, I remember standing in the barn with my phone pressed to my ear, looking out at the north pasture. For weeks, Marjorie had talked like the gate was already settled, like my road had become theirs because enough money had been spent on it. But legally, every layer underneath it was hollow. The 1926 deed proved the road belonged to the farm access chain. The survey proved the gate and booth sat inside that corridor. The county records proved Oak Ridge never received public approval for a residence entrance there. The sign proved they intended to exclude farm vehicles. The guard video proved they had actually done it. And their own marketing material proved they had promoted the entrance before securing the rights to use it. That was the moment the entire balance changed. Claire sent the full package to county planning, code enforcement, and the sheriff's civil division. She did not ask them to solve a neighbor argument. She asked them to review an unauthorized entrance constructed over a private agricultural access road, one that was being used to block the lawful owner from reaching his own working land. By Friday afternoon, the county planning office replied. They confirmed that Oak Ridge's approved subdivision access did not include an active residence-only northern entrance through North Farm Road. They also confirmed that any permanent gate, booth, signage, drainage modification, and traffic use in that location would need documentation that had not been provided. That email hit harder than any argument I could have made at the gate. Because now the question was no longer whether Thomas Whitaker was being stubborn. The question was why Oak Ridge Estates had built and advertised an entrance the county had not approved and the land records did not support. If you are following this story because you have ever been told by an HOA or developer that something was already decided, remember this part. Approved is not a magic word. Ask who approved it. Ask where it was recorded. Ask for the permit number. Ask for the easement. Ask for the survey. And share this story with someone who owns land near a growing subdivision, because pressure often arrives wearing a polished logo and carrying a site plan. Marjorie tried one more time to control the story. She sent residents an email saying a temporary access dispute had been raised by an adjoining landowner and that the HOA was working with council to protect the community's investment. She made it sound like I was attacking them. She made it sound like their entrance was being threatened by an unreasonable farmer who did not appreciate progress. But Claire already had the records. So she sent Marjorie's email, the 1926 deed, and the county's response to the HOA's attorney with a final warning. If residents continued using the gate, and if security continued blocking my farm access, we would seek immediate injunctive relief. That phrase finally got their attention. The next morning, the guard booth was empty. The gate was still standing, but it was locked open. The residence-only sign had been covered with a black tarp. No one waved me through. No one apologized. No one admitted anything. But for the first time since they had paved it, I drove my truck down North Farm Road without asking permission from a man sitting in a booth on my family's land. I went slowly. Not because I had to. Because I wanted the dashcam to capture every foot of it. Marjorie had said an old farm road could not stand in the way of progress. She was wrong. It was not the road standing in the way. It was the deed beneath it. And that deed was about to bring the county to their brand new gate. The county came out the following Wednesday. Not in a rush. Not with sirens. Not with anyone shouting across the gate. Just 2 county trucks, 1 planning officer, 1 code enforcement inspector, and a sheriff's deputy who stood quietly beside them while the surveyor opened his tripod near the edge of the road. That was the part Marjorie had never understood. Once county records got involved, confidence stopped mattering. The black iron gate did not matter. The fresh asphalt did not matter. The polished sign did not matter. The only things that mattered were the deed, the survey, the approved subdivision plan, and what had actually been built on the ground. I met them at the south end of North Farm Road with Claire beside Maine. She had brought a binder thick enough to make the developer's representative look nervous before anyone said a word. Inside were the certified copies from the county clerk, the 1926 deed language, the survey, photos from before the paving, screenshots of Oak Ridge advertising the rear entrance, and the video of the guard refusing my truck. Marjorie arrived 10 minutes late with the property manager and 2 board members. She was still trying to look composed, but the moment she saw the sheriff's deputy standing next to the county inspector, something in her face changed. For weeks, she had treated this as a public relations problem. Now it was a land records problem, and land records do not care about HOA titles. The planning officer asked for the recorded easement allowing Oak Ridge Estates to use North Farm Road as a daily residence entrance. They did not have one. The inspector asked for the permit package approving the gate, booth, camera pole, drainage work, curbing, and traffic use. They did not have that either. The sheriff's deputy asked who had instructed security to block my farm vehicles from using the road. The property manager looked at Marjorie. Marjorie looked at the developer's representative. The developer's representative looked at the asphalt, as if the answer might be painted somewhere between the lane stripes. Then the surveyor started placing flags. That was when the whole lie became visible. 1 flag went beside the gate post. Another beside the guard booth. Another near the camera pole. Another beside the curb where the asphalt widened into the entrance lane. Every flag landed inside the old farm access corridor described in my family's records. It was no longer a theory. It was no longer my word against theirs. It was standing there in bright color, cutting straight through their expensive new entrance. The county planning officer finally said the entrance could not operate for residents without proof of legal access and proper approval. Code enforcement documented the unapproved structures and modifications. The sheriff's deputy told the security company they had no authority to block me from using the farm road while the matter was being reviewed. By the end of that inspection, the gate was locked open, the booth was ordered inactive, and Oak Ridge was instructed to stop advertising or using the road as a residence-only entrance. That evening, Oak Ridge held an emergency HOA meeting at the clubhouse. I stood in the back of the room, not because I wanted drama, but because Claire told me to hear what was said publicly. The room was packed with residents who had been told for months that the rear gate was a luxury amenity. Some of them had paid higher lot prices because of it. Some had chosen homes near that side of the subdivision because they thought they would have a faster commute. Now they were learning that the shortcut had been built across a farm road the HOA did not own. Marjorie tried to call it a temporary title issue. She tried to say the board had acted based on developer assurances. She tried to frame me as an adjoining landowner refusing to cooperate with community progress. But residents had questions she could not polish away. They wanted to know why no easement had been recorded. They wanted to know why no final county approval existed. They wanted to know why HOA money had been spent on a guard booth, gate equipment, cameras, asphalt, curbs, and signage before anyone confirmed the legal right to use the road. Most of all, they wanted to know whether the homes marketed with that entrance had been sold under misleading claims. The HOA attorney finally stood and admitted that, as of that meeting, he had not located a valid recorded easement granting Oak Ridge residents daily access over North Farm Road. That one sentence broke the room open. People who had spent weeks treating me like the problem suddenly turned toward the board. A man in the front row demanded to know who approved the expense. A woman near the aisle asked whether there would be a special assessment to remove the entrance. Another resident said the developer had shown them the rear gate during their home tour and described it as permanent. I did not speak. I did not need to. The deed had spoken. The county had spoken. The survey flag sitting outside the gate had spoken louder than I ever could. If you have ever watched someone twist a private property issue into a community inconvenience, leave your thoughts in the comments, because this is the moment every homeowner hopes for. The moment when the truth leaves the argument and enters the record. By the next week, the county issued a formal notice. Oak Ridge could not operate the rear entrance without acquiring lawful access, submitting revised plans, addressing drainage, and resolving the encroachment on Whitaker Farm's private agricultural road. Until then, the residents-only gate was not an amenity. It was a violation with fresh asphalt. And the bill for that violation was only beginning. The rear entrance stayed locked open for 2 weeks before Oak Ridge finally admitted what everyone already knew. They were not going to get an easement from me. Marjorie tried, of course. She sent a carefully worded proposal through the HOA attorney offering what she called a reasonable access arrangement. In exchange for letting residents use North Farm Road as their private entrance, Oak Ridge would maintain the asphalt, keep the gate system in place, and provide me with what they described as courtesy access for agricultural use. Courtesy access. I read that phrase at my kitchen table and felt my father's old warning settle over the room again. They still did not understand. They were asking me to accept permission to use my own road, from the same people who had already blocked me from it once. Claire's response was short. No. After that, the county deadline did the work that arguments never could. The guard booth came down first. Then the camera pole. Then the keypad. Then the residents-only sign was removed from the gate and hauled away in the back of a maintenance truck. The iron gate itself was taken out a week later because it sat inside the farm access corridor and narrowed the turning radius for my hay trailer. I did not require them to tear out every inch of asphalt right away. Some people expected me to. Some neighbors told me I should make them rip it up just to prove a point. But the truth was, the paved surface made it easier for me to move heavy equipment in bad weather as long as it stayed under my control. So the settlement left the road surface in place, but stripped Oak Ridge of every sign, barrier, camera, rule, and claim attached to it. The road went back to being what it had always been. Whitaker Farm access. Oak Ridge paid my attorney's initial fees, the survey cost, the extra farm expenses caused by the detours, and part of the damage near the creek crossing. The developer covered a separate portion because their marketing materials had shown the northern gate as a selling feature before the legal rights were secured. Several residents filed complaints of their own, saying they had been shown the entrance during sales tours and told it was permanent. That part was no longer my fight, but it shook the neighborhood harder than anything I had done. At the next HOA meeting, the numbers were read out loud. Asphalt work. Gate equipment. Guard booth. Security setup. Legal review after the fact. County compliance. Removal costs. Settlement payments. Every dollar had come from people who thought they were buying convenience, not paying for a board's failure to read a deed. Marjorie lost her position as HOA president at the next election. It was not close. The new board passed a rule requiring a title review, current survey, county approval, and recorded easement verification before any future project could touch a boundary, access road, drainage corridor, or neighboring parcel. That rule should have existed from the beginning, but sometimes communities only discover common sense after someone else's land teaches them a lesson. As for me, I went back to work. One cool morning after everything was settled, I drove my tractor down North Farm Road for the first time without a guard, without a gate, without a camera pointed at my windshield. The asphalt was still there beneath the tires, smooth and black, but it no longer felt like Oak Ridge property. It felt like proof. Proof that a road can be paved over, renamed, marketed, guarded, and dressed up with expensive iron, and still belong to the family whose deed says it does. At the North Bend, I stopped and put up a new sign on my fence. Whitaker Farm Access. Established 1926. Private road. Nothing flashy. Nothing angry. Just history, written clearly enough for the next person who thought old paper did not matter. If this story keeps one landowner from ignoring a strange survey stake, or one homeowner from trusting an HOA just because a project looks official, then share it with them. Because property rights do not protect themselves. You have to keep the records. You have to ask for the easement. You have to check the county file. You have to measure the line before someone else moves it for you. I did not win because I was louder than Marjorie. I did not win because I had more money than a developer. I did not win because I blocked the gate with a tractor, even though I thought about it more than once. I won because my family kept the deed, because I stayed calm long enough to document the truth, and because the county still understood what Oak Ridge forgot. An old road is not empty just because rich people want to use it. And an old deed is not weak just because the ink has faded. Sometimes the strongest thing on a property is not the fence, the gate, or the pavement. Sometimes it is a piece of paper from 1926, waiting quietly in a safe, ready to remind everyone exactly where the line has always been.